The colony of Erythra was calm that morning, sunlight spilling across the silver roofs of the settlement, like liquid gold. Commander Elias Kane walked slowly along the main avenue, his boots making soft echoes on the metal walkways. He enjoyed these quiet mornings, when the hum of life in the colony felt peaceful and unhurried. Most of the settlers were already awake, preparing for their daily tasks, tending gardens, or checking equipment. Birds, or something like them, chirped from the high towers, a pleasant reminder that even on a faraway planet, life had a rhythm humans could recognize. Elias had always felt a deep connection to these moments of stillness. It gave him time to think, to notice details others might overlook. Today, though, he sensed something unusual before he even reached the transport dock. A small hum of anticipation lingered in the air, faint but distinct. His brow furrowed as he glanced toward the landing zone. Where the colony's supply shuttle had just touched down, the door hissed open, and a figure stepped out. It was a girl. She was small and delicate, no taller than 12 or 13 humans, yet her presence seemed to stretch beyond the physical space she occupied. Her hair fell in waves like liquid silver, catching the sunlight in a way that made it appear almost alive. Her eyes were the color of quicksilver, reflective and deep, scanning the colony as if taking it all in at once. She moved with an elegance and lightness that was both graceful and strange. Elias's gaze fell to the shadow she cast. Something immediately felt wrong. The shadow did not match her perfectly. It was close, similar in shape, but there was a subtle difference, a hesitation in the way it followed her steps. When she lifted her foot, the shadow seemed to linger a moment longer before copying the motion. When she turned, the shadow twisted slightly as if it had its own understanding of her movements. Elias blinked and rubbed his eyes, certain he was imagining it. But no, he saw it again. The girl smiled politely at the crowd of settlers gathered near the transport dock, and her lips moved as she introduced herself. "Hello. I am Lyra," she said, her voice soft, melodic, carrying a tone that made people feel calm. "I am here to learn and to help." Elias frowned. The words themselves were harmless enough, but his mind was still tangled in the enigma of her shadow. He watched as the other settlers welcomed her with curiosity and warmth, none of them noticing the subtle oddity that had caught his attention. Lyra stepped forward, her movements deliberate and careful, yet natural. Every step she took was mirrored almost perfectly by her shadow, almost, but not quite. As the morning progressed, Lyra moved among the colonists, helping to organize supplies, observe equipment, and even assist in small tasks that required careful attention. It was astonishing how quickly she adapted to human technology. She handled tools that most settlers had struggled with for weeks, as if she had used them all her life. Her shadow, however, continued to behave differently. At times, it seemed to lean forward to inspect something before her eyes had reached it. At other moments, it seemed to linger behind as though considering the next action. Elias found it both fascinating and unsettling. During the midday meal, Elias sat quietly at the edge of the common hall, observing Lyra interact with the colonists. She laughed softly when a young child tripped over a small crate, helping him up without a hint of impatience. Her shadow mimicked her movements, yet at times it appeared to reach toward the child even before Lyra moved. Elias could not take his eyes off it. The more he watched, the more he realized that her shadow seemed almost alive, independent, aware of more than just the physical world. After lunch, Elias finally decided he could no longer ignore it. He approached her cautiously, careful not to startle her. "Lyra," he said, his voice steady though his curiosity was brimming. "May I speak with you for a moment?" She turned, her expression open and serene. "Of course, Commander Kane," she replied. Her shadow shifted with her movement, twisting slightly before settling back into position. Elias felt a pang of wonder and a twinge of worry simultaneously. "Your shadow," he began, unsure how to phrase what he had observed. "It behaves differently. Sometimes it moves before or after you. Have you noticed?" Lyra tilted her head slightly, her silver eyes glinting with something like amusement. "Yes," she said softly. "You noticed it. Most humans do not." Elias's brow furrowed. It's impossible, isn't it? Shadows follow the body. How can yours? He hesitated, searching for words. How can it do that? Lyra smiled gently. It is part of who I am, she explained. My people see the world differently. Shadows are not just shapes cast by light. They are extensions of the mind, connected to perception and awareness. My shadow helps me understand what is around me in ways that go beyond sight and sound. Elias listened, fascinated despite himself. He had spent his life exploring new worlds, solving complex problems, and understanding the unknown. Yet this was different. This was not a challenge of technology or survival. It was a challenge of understanding the nature of life itself. Can it interact? He asked, unsure what he meant, but compelled to find out. Lyra nodded slightly. Yes, it can sense, predict, and respond. It learns with me. It is part of how I experience this world. Elias took a deep breath. His mind raced with questions, but he forced himself to stay calm. The implications were enormous. If humans could study this, learn from it, perhaps they could expand their understanding of perception, intuition, and awareness. But more than that, he felt a surge of admiration. Here was a being who had arrived in their world not as a conqueror or a threat, but as a guide, someone whose existence could teach them something profound about seeing the universe differently. For the rest of the afternoon, Elias followed Lyra discreetly as she moved through the colony. He observed her shadow carefully. It was mesmerizing. When she examined plants, the shadow seemed to reach toward them slightly, as if assessing their health before she touched them. When she checked the water supply, the shadow stretched across the pipes, tracing unseen currents and bends in the pipes that humans could not detect without instruments. Elias realized that her shadow was not just a curiosity, it was a tool, an extension of her mind, capable of perceiving aspects of the world invisible to ordinary human senses. He felt a sense of humility he had not experienced in years. Humans prided themselves on their ingenuity and adaptability, but this girl and her shadow were something entirely different. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the colony, Lyra paused in the central plaza. Children gathered around her, fascinated by her calm presence and her gentle way of interacting. Her shadow moved slightly ahead of her, bending toward the children as if to comfort them, to shield them from minor stumbles and mishaps before they occurred. Elias watched from a distance, feeling a mixture of wonder and responsibility. He knew that understanding Lyra, understanding her abilities, could teach humans something extraordinary. But he also understood that this was delicate. Fear could easily turn admiration into suspicion. Curiosity, if mishandled, could lead to mistakes. He needed to proceed carefully, to observe without interfering, to learn without alarming. That evening, Elias returned to his quarters, the image of Lyra's shadow etched in his mind. He could still see it stretching and bending, moving with a life of its own, reflecting a consciousness that humans had never imagined. He sat down at his desk, opening a log to record his observations. The girl's name is Lyra, he wrote. She arrived today, small and seemingly fragile, yet her presence commands attention. Her abilities are subtle but remarkable. Her shadow does not merely follow her. It acts independently, perceiving and responding to the environment. Humans have always relied on sight, sound, and touch. But her shadow adds another layer of awareness. Understanding it could expand human perception. Further observation required. Elias leaned back, staring out the window at the slowly darkening sky. Stars began to pierce the twilight, distant points of light that reminded him of the vastness of the universe. Humanity had always reached outward, exploring planets, stars, and galaxies. Yet here, on this small colony, something entirely unexpected had arrived, something that could change the way humans understood the universe, not through machines or weapons, but through observation, awareness, and the quiet power of a shadow that did not match its body. He thought again of Lyra, of the serenity in her movements, the gentle way she helped those around her, and the subtle, extraordinary nature of her shadow. He realized that humans had a choice. They could fear the unknown, or they could learn from it. And he, Commander Elias Kane, would make sure that curiosity and understanding led the way. As he drifted to sleep that night, his last thoughts were of light and shadow, of what it meant to observe, and of the quiet, profound possibility that humans, with their courage and willingness to understand, might one day see the universe in ways even more extraordinary than this girl and her shadow. Tomorrow would bring more observation, more questions, and perhaps answers. But tonight, he allowed himself the rare feeling of awe, and somewhere in the colony, in the stillness of the evening, Lyra's shadow moved independently for a moment, pausing as if sensing that someone was watching. Then it settled back into place, obedient yet sentient, calm yet alive, a quiet reminder that the universe was far more wondrous than humans had imagined. The morning sun rose gently over the colony, spilling warm light over the silver buildings and winding walkways of Erythra. Commander Elias Kane walked through the central plaza, his thoughts still heavy with curiosity about Lyra. She had been in the colony for 2 full days now, and already her presence was impossible to ignore. Settlers spoke of her quietly among themselves, using words like remarkable and gifted, though no one could quite say why. Even the children adored her, laughing as she moved among them, helping with small tasks and answering endless questions about the world beyond. Elias's eyes, however, were drawn not to Lyra herself, but to her shadow. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable to anyone else, but he had learned to watch carefully. The shadow no longer simply mimicked her movements, it seemed to anticipate them. It stretched toward objects before she touched them, moved ahead as if surveying the path she would take, and sometimes even lingered behind, as though contemplating something only it could perceive. Today, Elias decided he would observe her more closely, to see if the shadow's unusual behavior was simply a quirk or something far deeper. He followed her as she walked through the garden section of the colony, where settlers were tending small plots of earth plants adapted to Erythra's soil. Lyra knelt near a young sapling, brushing dirt from its leaves, and for a moment, the shadow moved independently, stretching toward a patch of soil that looked slightly dry. Elias held his breath as he watched. The shadow seemed to hesitate, then press itself toward the soil, bending as if to probe. Lyra's hands followed only moments later, watering the patch with gentle precision. It was impossible, he thought. The shadow had predicted where care was needed before Lyra acted. The thought stirred both wonder and a cautious excitement inside him. Could humans ever perceive the world in this way? Could they learn from Lyra's presence, or even from her shadow? Lyra glanced up and noticed him standing a few steps away, watching. She smiled, her silver eyes glinting in the morning light. "Good morning, Commander Kane," she said softly. Her voice carried no surprise, no fear, only calm understanding. "You watch closely. Do you see?" Elias hesitated. I think I do," he said. "Your shadow. It moves differently. It reacts before you act." Yes," she replied, tilting her head. "It is part of how I understand the world. You see with eyes and hands, but I see with another part of myself as well. My shadow perceives things beyond what is visible." Elias stepped closer, trying to process the idea. "In a way," Lyra agreed, "it is connected to my thoughts, my attention, and my awareness. It does not replace my senses, but it extends them. It helps me notice patterns and possibilities that might escape ordinary perception." Elias frowned slightly, deep in thought. Humans had always relied on tools, on instruments, on careful observation. Yet here was a being who could sense the environment in a way no technology could replicate. He realized that learning from her and from her shadow could be transformative for the colony. "Can it help with problems?" he asked cautiously, unsure if he was speaking too boldly. Lyra's smile widened, just slightly. "Yes. It can anticipate dangers, find solutions, and suggest actions before they occur. but it is not magic. It works best when paired with understanding and patience. Elias nodded slowly, already imagining the possibilities. Today, he decided, he would test the Shadow's abilities. Not in any aggressive or intrusive way, but in a manner that could help the colony and reveal more about Lyra's gift. Later that day, the colony received a routine report from the environmental sensors. A sudden shift in wind patterns had been detected in a nearby canyon. Unusual but not immediately dangerous. The colony's automated systems suggested no immediate concern, but Elias felt a twinge of unease. Something about the way the report was phrased hinted at potential disruption to the water channels that irrigated the garden plots. He found Lyra in the central workshop, organizing supplies. "Lyra," he said, "there is a report from the sensors. The wind patterns are changing in the canyon near the northern irrigation channels. The automated system doesn't see it as dangerous, but I want to make sure we're prepared. Could you help?" She nodded, her shadow stretching slightly ahead of her, as if it already sensed the concern. "Yes, Commander. Show me the map." Elias unrolled the digital map on the table. Lyra's shadow shifted over it, moving like a flowing shape that extended beyond her body. Elias watched in fascination as the shadow hovered above the northern canyon, tracing lines and patterns that the sensors could not detect. After a few moments, Lyra pointed to several points along the irrigation channels. "Here and here," she said. "The wind may shift debris into these areas. Small blockages could form if we do not act in time." Elias glanced at the map, then at the shadow, then back at Lyra. It was uncanny. The shadow had anticipated the exact locations where a problem could occur. Locations that had seemed stable in the data provided by the colony's advanced sensors. How did it know?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. "It is not knowledge in the human sense," Lyra explained. "It perceives patterns and probabilities. It notices subtle changes, energy flows, and tendencies that are invisible to ordinary sensors." Elias felt a thrill of admiration. Humans prided themselves on ingenuity and invention. But here was something entirely new. He realized that the combination of human reasoning and Lyra's perception could achieve more than either alone. "We should fix it," he said. "Lead the way." The team moved quickly, following Lyra's guidance. She walked with calm certainty, while her shadow seemed to anticipate every twist and turn of the canyon paths. When debris was moved or small obstructions cleared, her shadow paused and adjusted, pointing to areas needing further attention. Colonists worked in tandem with her instructions, often marveling at her precision. As the afternoon stretched on, Elias could not contain his curiosity. "Lyra," he asked carefully, "do you do this for every world you visit? Do all your people have shadows like this?" She shook her head softly. "Not all. My people have learned to adapt in many ways. Our shadows can perceive, guide, and sometimes protect. But it is rare to find one who has learned to work so closely with humans, who can cooperate and share without fear." Elias considered this. Humans were often cautious, even suspicious, when encountering the unknown. Yet here was a being whose abilities could teach them, inspire them, and expand their understanding. He realized that humans had always thrived when curiosity outweighed fear. Perhaps this was another moment to test that instinct. By evening, the northern canyon and the irrigation channels were secure. Lyra's shadow had moved and shifted countless times, predicting and suggesting actions that the humans executed with careful precision. When the final inspection was complete, Elias allowed himself a small smile. The colony had not only avoided potential disruption but had learned something remarkable in the process. "Thank you, Lyra," he said sincerely. "You've saved the irrigation system and helped us see possibilities we might have missed." She smiled gently, her shadow resting alongside her, calm now but still subtly alive. "We work together. You humans notice, decide, and act. My shadow guides. But your minds and hands complete the work. That is what makes this possible." Elias nodded slowly, feeling a deep sense of pride. Humanity had always relied on adaptability and collaboration, even in the face of the unknown. Today, those traits had allowed them to work with someone entirely different, to learn from her in ways that transcended ordinary experience. Later, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Elias walked through the garden again, this time with Lyra beside him. Shadows stretched long and golden across the walkways. Her shadow moved beside hers, bending slightly to touch leaves and flowers before she did. Children played nearby, laughing, while colonists prepared their evening meals. The colony was alive, vibrant, and thriving. Elias spoke quietly, almost to himself. I used to think human perception was the limit of understanding. Today, I see that we have only scratched the surface. There is more to notice, more to learn, and perhaps, with Lyra's help, we can see beyond what we ever imagined. Lyra glanced at him, her silver eyes reflecting the fading light. You notice more than most, Commander. That is why you see the shadow as it is. Curiosity and care are as important as any ability. Without them, even the most extraordinary gift could go unnoticed. Elias smiled, feeling both humbled and inspired. For the first time, he felt the full weight of possibility. Humanity had always been resourceful, resilient, and creative. But this collaboration with someone so different was a new chapter in their journey. That night, as Elias recorded his observations in the colony logs, he wrote not only about Lyra and her shadow, but also about the power of observation, the courage to learn, and the potential within humans to rise to challenges in ways they had never considered. Lyra's shadow had become more than a curiosity. It was a symbol of what could happen when humans opened their minds to possibilities beyond the obvious, beyond the measurable, and beyond the ordinary. Elias paused, looking out at the starlit sky. Each star was a distant world, a possibility waiting to be explored. With beings like Lyra, and the wisdom she could share, humanity's potential seemed limitless. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new mysteries, and perhaps new lessons from the girl whose shadow did not match her body. But tonight, he allowed himself a rare sense of wonder and quiet satisfaction. Somewhere in the colony, Lyra's shadow shifted once more, independent yet perfectly in tune with her movements. It stretched toward the stars above, as if aware of the vastness of the universe and the possibilities waiting for those willing to see, notice, and learn. And Elias Kane, watching from his quarters, knew that humanity had taken another step forward, not through strength, not through conquest, but through curiosity, collaboration, and the simple act of noticing the extraordinary in the ordinary. The sun rose slowly over Erythra, casting warm light across the silver buildings and winding walkways of the colony. Commander Elias Kane stepped outside his quarters, inhaling the crisp morning air. Today felt different. There was a quiet tension in the colony, not fear, but an anticipation that something important was about to happen. Settlers were busy in the gardens and workshops, preparing for the day, while Lyra moved gracefully among them, her shadow stretching ahead and bending slightly in ways that drew Elias's attention. Over the past week, Lyra had become an integral part of the colony's daily life. Children followed her around, fascinated by her calm manner and the subtle movements of her shadow. The colonists trusted her guidance and often sought her advice on everything from irrigation to solar panels. Yet, as extraordinary as her abilities were, Elias knew there was more to learn. Her shadow had been a tool, a guide, and a companion, but now, it seemed, the colony itself would test their limits, and Lyra's perception would become more important than ever. By mid-morning, the colony's environmental monitors began to register something unusual. Wind currents shifted in strange patterns over the northern canyon. The same canyon Lyra had helped protect days earlier. Small dust storms began to form unexpectedly, swirling unpredictably around the irrigation channels. On a normal day, the automated systems could have managed it, but the readings were inconsistent, changing so quickly that the machines could not keep up. Elias frowned as he studied the reports, realizing that this was no ordinary fluctuation. He found Lyra in the central workshop, organizing supplies for the colonists. "Lyra," he said, The wind patterns in the northern canyon are changing faster than we can track. The sensors are confused, and the irrigation channels could be affected again. We need your help. Lyra nodded calmly. Her shadow stretched forward, moving slightly ahead of her body, as if sensing the changes before they became visible. Show me the map, she said. Elias unrolled the digital display, revealing the winding irrigation channels, the canyon, and the surrounding fields. Lyra's shadow flowed over the map like liquid, touching points that seemed insignificant to human eyes but critical in the shadow's perception. She pointed to several key areas. Debris will accumulate here and here, she said. The wind will redirect water flow here. If left unattended, some plants may be damaged. But we can prevent that if we act now. Elias nodded, realizing that the shadow's foresight was far beyond anything the colony had previously encountered. He assembled a team of settlers, all eager to follow Lyra's guidance. They moved quickly, clearing debris, reinforcing channels, and adjusting barriers under her precise instructions. Lyra's shadow shifted continuously, predicting the movement of the wind, anticipating where new obstacles might appear, and guiding humans in real time. As they worked, Elias observed something remarkable. The shadow not only reacted to the environment, it seemed to communicate with the colonists in subtle ways. A slight bend in its form would draw attention to an unstable section of a wall. A flicker of movement would warn of a loose panel on a solar collector. The settlers began to respond instinctively, learning to read the shadow almost as if it were another member of the team. By late afternoon, the storm began to grow stronger. Dust whipped through the canyon, and sudden gusts threatened to overturn equipment and damage young plants. The colony's automated systems struggled to keep pace, but under Lyra's guidance, the humans moved with a synchronized efficiency. Her shadow stretched ahead, guiding them, and Elias felt a surge of pride. Humans were rising to the challenge not through force or technology alone, but through observation, intuition, and cooperation with someone entirely different. At one point, a gust of wind threatened to knock over a critical water pipe. Lyra's shadow stretched forward, almost touching the pipe before she could reach it. She moved instantly, steadying the pipe with calm precision. Elias watched in awe as the settlers adjusted surrounding supports in response, preventing a potential disaster. The shadow had anticipated the danger and allowed the team to act before the wind could cause real harm. As the storm grew, Elias noticed something he had not seen before. The shadow was beginning to interact with the environment in ways that went beyond prediction. It seemed to lift small objects slightly, guide flowing water with subtle movements, and even manipulate dust patterns to keep critical areas clear. Elias realized that the shadow was not only observing and predicting, it was subtly shaping the environment in harmony with human actions. He felt a deep sense of respect for both Lyra and humanity. Humans had always faced challenges through courage, innovation, and cooperation. Today, they were demonstrating those qualities on a new level, working alongside a being whose abilities were beyond human comprehension. He understood that this was the essence of what made humans special, their ability to adapt, to learn, and to collaborate with forces they did not fully understand. The storm reached its peak in the early evening, and the canyon was bathed in swirling dust and shifting light. Settlers worked tirelessly under Lyra's guidance, following the subtle cues of her shadow. Children were kept safely inside, and the adults moved with focused determination, trusting in the combination of human skill and alien insight. Elias moved among them, offering encouragement and observing the seamless coordination. It was unlike anything he had ever witnessed. A perfect blend of human ingenuity and alien perception, working toward a common goal. Hours passed, and gradually the storm began to subside. The wind slowed, dust settled, and the irrigation channels remained intact. Not a single plant had been lost, and the equipment had survived with minimal disruption. The colony had faced a challenge that could have caused serious setbacks, yet they had risen to it with precision, cooperation, and intelligence. Elias turned to Lyra, his silver-eyed companion, and smiled. "You've guided us through this better than any system or plan could have done. I don't know how to thank you." Lyra shook her head softly. It is not about thanks. It is about understanding. Humans notice, decide, and act. My shadow perceives possibilities and guides. Together, we achieve what neither could alone. Elias nodded, feeling a profound sense of admiration. Today had proven something essential. Humans were not limited by technology or circumstance. They could rise to extraordinary challenges when curiosity, observation, and cooperation guided them. And perhaps, he thought, that was what made humanity special, not merely strength or intelligence, but the willingness to learn, to adapt, and to embrace the unknown. As the sun set behind the canyon, Elias walked through the quiet streets of the colony, reflecting on the events of the day. Lyra moved beside him, her shadow stretching in the fading light, calm and deliberate, still alive in ways humans could scarcely comprehend. Children waved from their windows. Colonists tidied their areas, and the settlement seemed peaceful again, though the air still carried a sense of wonder. Elias spoke softly, almost to himself. I used to think human perception was the limit of understanding. Today, I see that we have only begun to scratch the surface. There is more to notice, more to learn, and more to achieve. With guidance like this, with insight and courage, humans can rise to challenges we never imagined possible. Lyra glanced at him, her eyes reflecting the last rays of sunlight. You notice more than most, Commander. Curiosity and care are as important as any ability. Without them, even the most extraordinary gift could go unnoticed. Elias smiled, feeling humbled and inspired. Humanity had faced storms before, challenges that required courage and ingenuity. But today was different. Today, they had faced the storm not with tools alone, but with insight, awareness, and the willingness to learn from someone entirely different. That was what set humans apart, their ability to rise, to adapt, and to grow, even in the face of the extraordinary. As night fell over Erythra, the stars began to appear, distant points of light in a vast, endless sky. Elias stepped onto the balcony of his quarters, looking up and reflecting on the possibilities that lay ahead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, and perhaps new lessons from Lyra and her extraordinary shadow. But tonight, he allowed himself to feel the quiet triumph of a colony that had faced uncertainty and come through stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever. Somewhere below, Lyra's shadow moved independently for a moment, stretching toward the night sky, sensing patterns and possibilities invisible to human eyes. Then, it returned to her side, calm and deliberate, a reminder that the universe was full of wonders, waiting to be noticed and understood. Elias Kane, watching from above, felt a surge of pride, not just for Lyra, or for the shadow, but for humanity itself. Humans had proven again that their greatest strength lay not in power or technology, but in their curiosity, adaptability, and courage to embrace the unknown. And with that thought, he knew the colony was ready for whatever the universe might bring next. Together, humans and Lyra would face it not with fear, but with observation, understanding, and the quiet, extraordinary power of a shadow that did not match its body. The morning sun cast soft light across the colony of Erythra, turning the silver buildings to a warm hue. The streets were quiet, except for the soft footsteps of settlers beginning their daily routines. Commander Elias Kane walked through the plaza, watching the colony come alive. There was a new sense of calm and purpose here, a sense born from the events of the past days. The settlers had faced challenges that tested both their skill and their trust. And they had succeeded not alone, but together, guided in part by Lyra and the subtle movements of her extraordinary shadow. Lyra moved beside him, her presence serene, her silver hair catching the sunlight as she walked. Her shadow moved alongside her, bending slightly at times, stretching forward, or curling in ways that seemed almost deliberate. Elias had long since learned to read it not perfectly, but enough to understand that it carried information, awareness, and guidance. The shadow had become a quiet teacher, revealing possibilities that humans might otherwise have overlooked. Commander Kane, Lyra said softly, breaking the silence. The colony is learning quickly. The settlers notice more, observe more, and think beyond the ordinary. Their curiosity grows, and their confidence expands. It pleases me. Elias smiled. It pleases me too, Lyra. I never imagined we could adapt so quickly, or trust so instinctively. It is extraordinary what we've achieved together. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the morning light. Humans have always had the potential. They only needed to notice and to act. Sometimes, guidance can help them see possibilities they did not recognize. The day's work began as usual, with settlers attending to gardens, repairing equipment, and maintaining the colony. Lyra moved among them, offering advice, helping to organize tasks, and quietly demonstrating subtle ways of observing patterns and understanding the environment. The settlers responded with attentiveness, following her suggestions and integrating them into their own work. Children followed behind her, giggling as she patiently showed them how to observe small changes in plants, the flow of water, and the subtle movement of air. By mid-morning, a routine inspection revealed small irregularities in the water channels supplying the gardens. Though these were minor, Elias recognized that minor problems could grow into larger ones if left unattended. He looked to Lyra. "Can we handle this?" he asked. Her shadow stretched ahead, curling slightly around the edges of the channels. "Yes," she replied. "It is minor, but attention now will prevent disruption later." Together, they led a team of settlers to the affected areas. Lyra's shadow moved ahead, guiding their steps and drawing attention to subtle bends and minor blockages. The team worked efficiently, clearing the channels and reinforcing weak points. It was a simple task, yet Elias could see the difference. The shadow not only guided them, it taught them. The settlers began to notice patterns themselves, anticipating issues before Lyra or her shadow pointed them out. Elias watched this quietly, feeling a profound sense of pride. Humans were learning not only from observation but from collaboration with someone entirely different. Their curiosity, their ability to adapt, and their willingness to trust had unlocked a level of understanding he had never seen before. This was humanity at its best. Open, adaptive, and ready to grow. After the work was complete, Lyra paused in the central plaza, surrounded by children and curious settlers. Her shadow moved gently around the group, curling protectively without touching anyone. The children laughed, and settlers smiled, watching as the girl and her shadow interacted with the world in ways that were both subtle and extraordinary. Elias approached her quietly. "Lyra, may I ask? Your shadow. It's incredible. But can it teach us more? Can it help humans understand things beyond what we see now?" She smiled. "Yes, Commander. It is not only perception. It is also awareness. Humans can learn to observe carefully, to notice patterns, to anticipate changes. My shadow can demonstrate, but humans must practice, must pay attention. That is the true learning." Elias nodded thoughtfully. He realized that humans had always learned best when guided, when shown new ways of seeing, but ultimately relied on their own curiosity and reasoning. Lyra's shadow was not a replacement for human perception, it was an extension, a teacher, a mirror that reflected possibilities humans might miss. The afternoon brought an opportunity to test this further. A new settler group arrived, young adults fresh from training, eager to contribute but unfamiliar with the subtle environmental cues that kept the colony safe and productive. Elias and Lyra decided to lead them through a practical lesson. They walked through the gardens and workshops, with Lyra demonstrating how her shadow anticipated problems. At first, the new settlers struggled. They could not yet see what the shadow indicated, nor understand its subtle signals. But with patience, guidance, and repeated observation, they began to notice. A slight lean of the shadow toward a plant signaled minor water stress. A gentle curl toward a corner of a channel indicated a potential obstruction. Slowly, the settlers adjusted their actions, learning to interpret the subtle movements as guidance rather than mystery. Elias observed with satisfaction. The humans were learning not by force or instruction alone, but by paying attention, by noticing, by allowing curiosity and understanding to guide their actions. This was the essence of human strength, adaptability, and intelligence, combined with the willingness to explore the unknown. As the sun began to lower, casting long golden shadows across the colony, a quiet moment unfolded. Lyra stood in the central plaza, her shadow stretched and bending in ways that seemed almost alive. The settlers gathered around her, listening as she spoke softly about observation, awareness, and the importance of noticing details. Children imitated her shadow's movements, learning to see patterns in the way light fell, how plants responded to water, and how the colony's equipment could be monitored more effectively. Elias watched from a distance, feeling the weight of what had been achieved. Humanity had always faced challenges, but today was different. Today, they had learned to collaborate with someone entirely different, to trust guidance beyond their own experience, and to grow in ways that had once seemed impossible. Night began to fall over the colony. Stars appeared, distant points of light in the endless sky. Elias walked to his quarters, reflecting on the day. He felt a deep sense of pride, not in himself alone, nor even in the colony, but in humanity's ability to rise to challenges, to notice the extraordinary, and to embrace learning from the unknown. Lyra's shadow had been a teacher, but the humans had done the work. They had observed, adapted, and applied what they learned. He paused on his balcony, looking down at the plaza. Lyra's shadow stretched and bent as she moved among the settlers, calm and deliberate, yet alive with awareness. Children played nearby, settlers prepared for the evening, and the colony seemed peaceful, vibrant, and thriving. Elias spoke softly, almost to himself. I used to think humans were limited to what we could see, hear, or measure. Today, I see that our strength lies in noticing, learning, and trusting our curiosity. That is what makes humanity extraordinary. Lyra turned slightly, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. You notice well, Commander. Humans have always had the potential to rise to challenges, to learn, and to grow. Sometimes, they only need guidance, an example, or a chance to observe beyond what they know. Your colony has taken that step. They are ready to learn more, to see more, and to do more. Elias smiled. Then we will continue. Tomorrow, the colony will explore, observe, and practice. And we will do it together with your shadow, with your guidance, and with our own curiosity. She nodded gently, her shadow curling protectively around the group of settlers. Yes, Commander. Together, we will see the world differently. Humans are capable of more than they imagine. All they need is patience, observation, and the courage to notice. The night deepened, and the colony quieted. Lights glimmered from the buildings, casting gentle reflections across the walkways. Elias walked slowly, thinking about the journey ahead. Lyra and her shadow had opened doors that humans had never seen before. They had demonstrated the power of perception, anticipation, and collaboration. And humans, with their intelligence and adaptability, had risen to meet the opportunity. As he reached his quarters, Elias looked back one last time. Lyra's shadow stretched toward the horizon, then settled beside her. It was calm, deliberate, alive, yet entirely in harmony with the humans around it. It was a reminder that the universe held possibilities beyond imagination, and that humans, through curiosity and courage, could rise to meet them. Elias realized that the story of the colony was only beginning. With guidance, trust, and the willingness to observe and learn, humanity could thrive on Erythra and beyond. Lyra's shadow was not merely a gift, it was a lesson, a symbol of potential, and a mirror reflecting what humans were capable of achieving when they looked beyond the obvious and embraced the unknown. The stars above seemed to shine brighter that night, as if acknowledging the achievement of humans who noticed, learned, and adapted. The colony slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that together, they could face any challenge, explore any mystery, and grow in ways they had never thought possible. And somewhere in the quiet of the plaza, Lyra's shadow stretched one last time, as if sensing the promise of tomorrow. It curled beside her, calm, deliberate, and alive. A silent teacher, a guide, and a reminder that humans, when curious and courageous, could rise to extraordinary heights. Elias Kane closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the quiet pride of a human who had witnessed growth, cooperation, and the unfolding of potential. The colony had survived challenges, learned from something beyond ordinary understanding, and embraced the unknown. Humanity, he realized, was extraordinary not because of strength, but because of curiosity, adaptability, and the courage to notice. The night passed quietly, and the stars above Erythra glimmered in patterns that humans might one day learn to understand, just as they had begun to learn the subtle language of a shadow that did not match its body. And with that realization, Elias knew that humanity's journey had only begun. Guided by curiosity, observation, and the quiet, extraordinary partnership of humans, and a girl whose shadow was more than it seemed.